All right. I am now. I've started the recording now. Okay. So let's kick off, everybody. Thank you. It's 9:03 in the morning Eastern time here in the US, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening for everybody who's in the rest of the world. Today is March 26th. This is the Phenotype Development Evaluation Work Group. We now meet once a month, and so at 9 a.m. on the last Thursday of the month. We have a packed agenda today, a lot of things to talk about. But before we go about, is there anybody who's totally new to the work group that who would like to introduce themselves, other than the AI bots that keep coming? Hey, Daniel, go ahead.
Hey, folks. Yeah, my first time coming in. Daniel Smith. I'm the manager of cancer analytics and reporting, as well as the lead architect of OMOP over at Emory University and Winship Cancer
Wow,
Institute. Great to be here.
that's wonderful. And how long have you been on OMAP?
Oh, I've been in OMOP and attending various work groups since I think 2018, but just like a lot of our focus at Emory, we right in the midst of getting our OMOP 5.4 really up and running and vibing with the oncology work group stuff. We shifted from Cerner to Epic data resourcing. So it's been a long journey to actually ETL our data, and we're finally ready to go to the more advanced steps in the OMOP journey, which is to really, start building comprehensive phenotypes and relying on the phenotype work group's good work to actually be able to assess what phenotypes are already out there and what we can add.
Oh, so wonderful to hear that, because we've been looking to partner with somebody who has rich, deep oncology data set, especially in the new oncology extensions, to see how we can phenotype. And we have never been able to access that. And so if you are willing to partner, would love this work group to work with you, especially with this new AI work stream. I think we can really do some deep phenotyping, rule-based phenotyping using AI in oncology.
Beautiful. Yeah. And our Madhu Bahera is a somebody who has been looking to utilize a lot of different LLM techniques locally, and we have a variety of infrastructure available to whether either loading something up locally or utilizing an API stream. We have a lot of really cool infrastructure in place, as well as we're trying to work with the oncology work group to update the NACER, which is, for those of you unfamiliar, the tumor registry standard in the US via SEER, and we want to update that to the latest versions of the NACER data dictionary. We're still back at the standard ingestion packages are still stuck in 2018, so we are version 18. So we're trying to make something new for V25. So yeah, very happy to help.
Excellent. Okay, so I'm looking forward to. I'll ping you and so that we can do a planning, and then if you can do an artistic collaboration, that'd be fantastic. There's a lot of innovation that we can do here. Great. Anybody else? Any questions to Daniel? Okay. All right. So this is the agenda for today. We have topics that we are continuing from our past meetings. As you know, we need to write a paper on mind meets machine, and Azza Shoaibi is taking the lead on that. So she gave us an update from the last call. So Azza, I'm going to put you on the spot to apologize.
And I literally put this, so it's a forcing mechanism. I don't actually have much update. I did not get to work on it last month. Yeah, a lot of things going on for J&J jobs. But yes, it would stay on the agenda so as to making sure that we push through. I did receive feedback since I did receive edits on the draft that is currently on the channel. From 2 people from the work group. So thank you for that. And I did have Sangeeta helped us getting the description of one of the AI arms that was missing. So that was the main missing content. And so now the content is complete. Thanks to Sangeeta. I think we have one AI group still didn't fully describe their workflow. But we have some bits and pieces that we can put together if we didn't hear back from them. But yes, so I will promise that by next meeting, it will be submitted. So that's my progress. That I didn't make progress, but I make more promises.
Okay, so the next, any questions for Azza before we go to Jackie? Okay, Jackie,
Yeah,
if you
do you
would.
mind if I share a quick slide? Just
Yes,
to
please.
summarize. Okay. So we submitted our panel to the AMIA Symposium that's in November, and we'll hear in May about acceptance status. And just on a related effort, we have our like foundational paper that we submitted to JAMIA Open on like our initial harmonization between our libraries. And I just submitted minor revisions to that. So hopefully we'll be hearing back on that paper too. But in terms of next steps for the framework, so just consolidating the edits. So thanks, Azza, for your edits from across the libraries. There's actually pretty good agreement. There are a few things where there's like fields that aren't available across all libraries. And I did see in your guys' 2026 OKRs that you have a plan for adding any fields that may be needed as part of the framework. I just wanted to like confirm
Yes.
that is a plan. Okay, great. There's not, again, I'll be sending this out, but it's not many, but so that's great. And then I'll be sharing that Excel in like a poll just to focus on the areas of disagreement. Again, there's only a few major points. And we want to just agree on the terminology that it's clear for others who are viewing this. And so now we're starting, we just met, Kelly and I just met yesterday with Wei Chi at Vanderbilt. We're targeting JAMIA. We are planning to describe the implementation first in Cypher and VUMC just because of the timing. We can always do more. But because we were thinking about November meeting, let's try to submit this paper earlier in the summer so that we don't have, it'd be really nice to have it in progress or accepted before the meeting. So that's what we're planning toward. Again, this is just like just to start. We could always discuss that. Anyway, so I hope to have a draft to you guys in April, but that's my update. Any questions?
Do you need any help?
I mean, I'll be asking for help because we'll need some consensus on a few points.
Yeah.
That's like the major thing is like voicing your
Yeah.
consensus on the terminology especially, but I'll probably, yeah, I'll definitely be reaching out to you guys for input.
And we'll
Jackie,
also, yeah, go ahead, Azza.
I just have a technical question. So the draft of the actual panel submission that went through, right? So that is
Yes, yeah,
okay.
and we can always change the presenter if we need, if
Yeah,
folks
no,
are,
so-
you know,
yeah.
so.
No,
Yeah.
it makes sense. Okay, I did wonder at some point, because we're in era of AI, and I know Ruchi brought that topic, but like I would wonder if like part of the discussion gonna be how does having a metadata framework that has like this standardization across all different phenotype libraries gonna help in AI tools that sits on these libraries.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
I like it's a topic like maybe AI don't need standardization. I mean that's one of the biggest thing, or maybe it actually does. So like that I know the panel like that part was not discussed much, but I know it's gonna come up just because we're in this era of AI.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree. We definitely we beefed that up a little bit more in the panel to like for the discussion, but we'll definitely need it as part of I plan to have it as part of the paper too. So
I'm going to build up. Can I take back the screen,
Oh, yeah.
Jackie? All right. So I'm going to touch on two topics as related. So we are also we are doing extraction of the OHDSI Phenotype library and feeding that into the Cypher library. That is a process that we have built, a pipeline that we have built before. We just have to do the next batch of extraction. So there is a proposed set of core definitions that has been delivered to Jackie. So we finally made some progress on it. Apologies, Jackie, for being so late. But we'll get there. And once you get your feedback, we'll create the pipeline for you. But that and the reason we made progress is because we have Sangeeta Bhatt, who's stepped up and has helping me out with managing the OHDSI Phenotype library. So Sangeeta, do you want to show your slides? You had some slides, and then I know Rupa is on the call, so she could also. Meanwhile, Daniel, you have a question.
Yeah, just really quickly, as somebody who's just getting on board, I'm wondering if there is any prior documentation indicating like why there is a transition over to Cypher. Just to satisfy my own curiosity. I don't want to hold up the group here.
Yeah, Jackie, you want to answer?
Yeah, I think we more see it as like a complement to the OHDSI Phenotype library, which like has the functionality of being in R and allowing access to programming code. Cypher, I just put the link in the chat too for you. Will make the definitions more discoverable to like a wider community. So I think that's my summary. I don't know if Azza, Gowtham, you want to add on to that?
Yeah.
That's okay.
100%. So like Cypher is like the group in the VA with Jackie's lead, they worked phenomenally to create a publicly accessible interface for curation of phenotypes across different. It was meant for VA, but then they were able, because of the way they built it, and because Jackie and Gowtham met at some point while they were about to release Cypher, and the way it's built is that it can take definitions across different communities and not necessarily from the VA. So it felt like it's a very great opportunity for collaboration, because while in OHDSI community, we work on phenotype, we have a way of structuring these phenotypes because we have a common data model that makes things easier and tools like Atlas. But like building an interface on top of our accumulation of phenotypes has always been a struggle of like, what would it look like? How will people access it? How will data partners will be able to contribute? And then Cypher came as like a perfect way of basically making all the OHDSI definitions public, not only through a GET where it's like kind of hard and kind of hard to understand the content, but once those all phenotypes exist in Cypher, you can literally search, and then you can limit your search to OHDSI definitions if you want to, and then you will be able to like really, and it then serves everybody. And there's no need for us to put the resources or design our own interface if Cypher feeds all the purposes and functionality. And that's the idea. I was like, okay, what is that metadata? Like, what do you want to surface? And that's where Jackie and across different scientists worked on like, what is a phenotype library metadata looks like? What exactly the attributes? What are minimum? What are required? And that's the other topic she talked about.
I wanted to add to Azza, and this is in line with OHDSI's mission. We are here to enable a community to generate evidence in a collaborative way. And the phenotype library, the OMAP common data model, the OHDSI software, they're all like public utility, right? It's nobody owns it, and so anybody can use it. Everybody should use it. And so if we want to make this like almost fair, findable, accessible, interoperable, and so on, this is evidence of it being fair, right? We're putting it in another library, and it's interoperable. This is cutting edge innovation and science. So absolutely want to do this. Yeah, Joel?
Yeah, I should know the answer to this, but I want to ask anyway. So in the way the phenotype library is structured, or it's going to be structured, is the phenotype a health condition or the phenotype a cohort definition that it's based on?
Yeah, the unit of representation is a cohort definition. And you can group it and organize it in many different ways. So, but the unit is a cohort, and then cohorts can be grouped as clinical ideas that have multiple cohort definitions. It could be organized as with tags that allows you to say this is the contributor. So you can group all the contributors' content, or you can group by author, or you can group by whatever. The grouping is immaterial, but the unit is a cohort definition.
So there might be, at some point in the phenotype library, there might be multiple definitions for myocardial infarction.
Absolutely. Then that's so each definition, the phenotype library is an honest broker. So contributor contributes and the library accepts. but but there is metadata associated with it that allows it to be rank ordered, discovered, peer reviewed, and so that metadata allows you to select from the content the one that best fits you, along with some recommendations from the library.
So, okay, one last, and I'll stop.
Yeah.
So is it the clinical? Could I find everything based upon the clinical description? No, the clinical idea. So myocardial infarction has a clinical idea. Myocardial infarction, I don't know, maybe with prior diabetes is another clinical idea. So myocardial infarction cohort definitions would all, if they're general, would all be under the myocardial infarction header. Can I find out all the myocardial infarction ones? Are they?
Yeah, so there is so I'll answer it in two ways. One is the current state, and then the potential future state. The potential future state is obviously the semantic layer on top of it. So you got to have the probabilistic framework of a large language model providing clustering based on a search. That's a future state that maybe Richard could talk about it. But the current state, every cohort definition that has been submitted to the OHDSI Phenotype library has a librarian assigned concept ID that of one or more concept IDs that captures the predominant meaning of the core definition. So if you have submitted an acute myocardial infarction definition, I have tagged it with a SNOMED concept ID corresponding to acute myocardial infarction. So that allows us to group using rule-based concepts, saying that this is all a network or a cluster of similar cohort IDs. So it is possible to do that right now.
Okay. All right. Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. Right. So I have 10 more minutes because I got Rupa on the call. I want to give Sangeeta the floor because I know Rupa and Sangeeta will probably share some. And then Rupa has to leave at 9:30, and that's why I'm jumping the agenda.
That's okay. Actually, I'm good if you have other agenda items.
Oh, okay. All right, let's go ahead. Sangeeta, do you want to talk? Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Gowtham. So we have some new submissions for the Phenotype library, and the OHDSI Phenotype library is undergoing a refresh. We have an upcoming release of the version 3.37.0. We are currently on 3.36.0, and this will be our first update since April 2025. So coming to the new submissions, let's talk about the one submitted by Dr. Rupa Makadia from J&J. These are the 4 pregnancy algorithms that she submitted, and since she's already on the call, Rupa, the floor is yours. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Sure, I could give a quick summary of what these are. So this work is, I guess, long time coming from before when the original Macho paper was developed, which is trying to look at claims data and develop a pregnancy algorithm. So the algorithm originally used the outcome to then define a start date based on various criteria that are clinically relevant in a pregnancy. With the enhancements in Atlas, with the changes in the coding structure, there was an opportunity for us to take what was a early development pre-Atlas definition of a phenotype to define these 4 outcomes into something that's a little bit more transportable, transparent, and can be used widely in the community. So the 4 outcomes, this first one is miscarriage, and the next one is ectopic pregnancy, stillbirth, and live birth. All 4 phenotypes have some of the same logic criteria. The inclusion-exclusion criteria are almost identical, but it uses that hierarchy to define the 4 outcomes. So I'll give an example. If someone goes in and has a gestational period of 20 weeks, that person's pregnancy start would be backdated to start 20 weeks before, and then we would follow them and exit the cohort at the time that we saw their live birth outcome. And so there are various checks that are kind of built in. They are pretty large, gnarly cohorts. But I hope I've done a good job to try to synthesize what they are. We do have a manuscript that describes these 4 in much greater detail, and we'll reference this Phenotype library release that is to be submitted in the next week or so. So it's already gone through the approval process. But yeah, if anyone has any specific questions, I'm happy to answer those.
Yeah, can I just throw in a quick comment, Rupa?
Sure.
Azza, you actually were polite and raised your hand. Go ahead.
I actually have 2 questions. One is, Rupa, this does mean that if people download the JSON and they have a common data model, this should run fine
Correct.
on data partners. So it's like fully compatible. There's no like special custom thing that we do in our CDM that's fully transferable. That's perfect.
This will
Through
create
Atlas.
a cohort of people through Atlas, and it will define the start date and the end date and plop that into like a result schema or a cohort table.
Okay.
Now, in order to use this for, let's say, a study, you would then have to think about adding in other criteria. This fully resolves the cohort to create the pregnancy era only. So there is not a way to then say, oh, amongst these people, let's go ahead and add in a drug criteria, condition criteria, or another phenotype. So that's just one sort of aha that we just have to keep in mind currently.
Yeah.
Then you would use some of other like packages like algebra or like subsetting or subsetter.
Correct. You could use a
Okay.
subsetter to then take the people with the episode and then find people with perhaps a drug or procedure or condition you're looking for and kind of combine those 2 things together.
Perfect.
Right.
And then the other thing, were you going to be giving the update that it's going to be in the next release to the pregnancy? I forgot. What's the working group? You guys have a working group, right?
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
We
So you're
do.
going to give
Correct.
that and transfer that. We have that to the community now in the Phenotype library.
Correct. So we have a meeting in 2 weeks. So I also run the pregnancy and reproductive health working group in OHDSI. And this was something that we had pretty top on our radar. The next steps, just if anyone is interested from this working group, is to sort of deploy this in partners that do a lot of pregnancy research and kind of see how this algorithm fares on their databases. Internally, we've looked at all of the claims databases. And the original paper also looked at CPRD as a mechanism to generate the algorithm heuristics and the sort of rationale of why we built the algorithm this way.
And all this work will be published, right? And we'll be able to reference it and
Correct.
like yeah, okay.
Yeah, so we needed these links to be able to go ahead and just plop those in the paper, and then it is going to be submitted.
Yeah. And Sangeeta,
Yeah,
remind
so-
me that
Yeah, sorry, Gowtham, go ahead.
remind me that they have been assigned a unique ID, correct? They're all
Yeah,
registered.
so I can send the unique IDs if we need it now, but otherwise I have it out of the top of my head. I think it is 14331, 332, 33, and 34, if I'm not wrong.
You're not wrong.
Okay. But yeah, they're expected to be released in the next version in 2 weeks. And like Rupa said, it's since it's already submitted, it's officially ready for peer review. And if anybody wants to run it in their data, so it's there, we can facilitate that. So
Right. And Daniel, if you want to test this on Emory, this is an opportunity. Joel, you got your hand raised.
Yeah, I just want to say real quick, the only thing I noted on the miscarriage one that you said is spontaneous abortion. It's also induced abortion as well, right?
Correct.
They're mixed. They're put in together. Okay.
They're mixed together because it is difficult to kind of separate those 2 items out. So we made that decision to go ahead and put them together.
Right. Thank you, Sangeeta.
okay, thank you.
I want to go next to. Thank you, Rupa. I want to go next to Richard. Richard, if you have, would you like to give us an update on the work that you're doing about the agentic library? I'm calling it agentic library, but it's part of a larger tool. that you're building.
Yeah, thank you. Can you hear me okay? Is sound okay? All right, good. Thank you. I'll try to share my screen. So just this is part of a generative AI work group led project. It's one of the key performance indicators for the year is to have a agentic assistant helping to get a person through a study design to operationalization. And are you able to see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay. So unfortunately, with the new tenant, I'm no longer able to use the chat. So I'll send a message asking to get back on to the group so I can use the chat. But if you want to see progress, go up to GitHub, Odyssey, and just look for study agent. You'll be able to find the what I'm pointing you to here up on the web. What I'm going to show you is a video that will show the current status. I'll just verbalize a little bit of what I'm going to show. So I took the existing cohort or phenotype library down from Odyssey, and I took the stuff that's in the INST folder, which has like a CSV file that has all of the cohorts, and then it has another file that has all the JSONs for the cohorts. And then I ran that through an indexing process where I passed it through a sentence embedding model. And there's documentation up here about how the indexing happened. So you can read a little bit about that. But essentially, I picked a specific model like Quinn, which is relatively small, and it could be done with any model that can do embedding and send back embeddings. And then this created a folder within the project when you have it down on your disk, which stored the embeddings. And they're language model embeddings, and then alongside of that is those would be called dense embeddings, and then alongside of that are some initial stab at sparse embeddings, which would be more kind of your classic information retrieval approach to things. It's great to see that there's work on metadata that's happening because in the long run you'd want to balance between the dense embedding and the sparse embeddings. But for just this initial prototype, I did a basic one. So with this having ran and put down onto disk the embeddings, then the concept is that I'm going to take you through, and I'll share my screen here. This is a flow diagram, which is the idea that someone has a particular study intent. They have some kind of a objective. And the objective in this case we're focused on is an incidence rate analysis. And so they have a statement about what they're trying to accomplish with their incidence rate analysis. And what the workflow I'm going to show you it'll run a call to an LLM to take their study intent, which could be a very simple statement all the way up to a larger protocol, and break it down into two smaller statements, one which would reflect the target cohort, and then one that would reflect the outcome cohort for the incident rate analysis. And then this is where the indexing will happen. It'll embed that statement for the target cohort, and it'll do a cosine similarity against the dense embeddings. It'll come back with the K top ranked closest associated phenotypes based on the embedding space. And then K is a parameter that you can change. And then it will send those up to a language model. For the demonstration that I'm going to show you today, it was a relatively small one. I think it was a Gemma 4B model that was running just inside of my lab. So it's an open source model. It's not a huge one. We've tested it with MedGemma 27B as well. And both of them are working pretty well. So there's more I could say about what else is going on besides just sending those up there and asking for a recommendation back. But you'll see it in action. It'll send back out of maybe the top 10 or 20 that it receives, the language module receives. It'll send back a suggestion about the first 4 or 5 that are probably reasonable. And then the user can choose to select those. And then it'll go on to another step, which is optional. But if they want then for the phenotype definitions, which are cohort definitions under the hood, to be checked or reviewed for potential improvements, things like changing the observational look-back period or adding certain concepts that are more relevant to the study intent, that interaction also can involve the language model. So that's this do improvements branch that's right here. If they choose not to do the improvements, that's fine. Then they'll just go ahead and that'll be saved onto their sort of like package that they're building for the study, and then they'll move through the same process with the outcome statement. There's a bigger scope to what I'm showing you. The study agent itself is a set of 2 services. One service is just coordinating clients like R or Python, or it could be Atlas or Web API that are interested in using certain services that involve an agent component to it. And then the other is an MCP library. So this study agent currently has a set of registered services that are MCP. If you don't know what that is, it's a way to give tools to LLMs to use to help them to accomplish tasks that they're not good at them by themselves, or that maybe they shouldn't do themselves. So I can tell you more about that later. But the bigger picture is shown in this diagram, which is for this use case right now. We're running through a full incidence rates analysis where the phenotype recommendation, selection, and improvement is one of the first steps. And then from there, once those are selected, there's pre-templated R code in the R package that's the client to the study agent. That then is not involving any AI at all. It's just taking those templates for the Strategos components, generate cohorts, do a keeper review, do a diagnostics on the cohorts, and then run an incidence rate analysis. It's going to just create a separate script for each one of those things. Then the user can go into those scripts and they can go through, and there can be additional calls out to the study agent. For example, in the keeper review script, I'll show you, they'll be able to actually interact with the agent to pull down samples for that fit a clinical definition of the specific target outcome or that they're interested in. And then they'll be able to have rows sent, which will be de-identified. There'll be none of the 18 PHI elements to an LLM to help it become an assistant in evaluating whether or not the event actually occurred that's being described. So this becomes a case review component. So with that in mind, does anybody have any questions before I show the videos of this?
Yes, I just have a comment. Incredible progress, right? At a breakneck speed that you have made. This was a concept just 2 months ago,
Yeah.
and you have something that is that is here working.
Well, that's because a lot of good feedback from everybody. You know, we think it's exciting, and the underlying concept here is that there's a lot of good, very good validated deterministic code that can just be coordinated with agentic support along the way at various places that humans need help with. So this isn't put it into a deep and wide language model and have it just do the work for us. It's building off of this deterministic code, which should be a better strategy. Okay, thank you. So I'll show the video.
Richard, I just want to say something, because before I heard the details from now, I didn't realize that by doing this workflow, you actually already started solving multiple tasks that we are all thinking of them separately, which is reviewing a cohort, generating a cohort, passing basic diagnostics like lookbacks, certain codes. So you already have pieces for all these things that we need them not only for this task, but building definitions regardless of a study context and all of that. So you have already pieces here, which does the tasks that are needed, even if you're not within a study that you just so I'm very impressed by the fact that you have these components.
Thank you. And don't assume that everything's been validated, though. The breakneck speed has been more demonstration and proof of concept up until now, but I do appreciate that.
Yeah, that's why we have a community and we can help you with experimentation to validate it.
Thank you. I know we have limited time. Do you want me to move on to the video?
Yes,
Daniel has a question.
Oh, please. Go ahead.
Yeah, just a really quick question and also a comment. I actually submitted to AMIA recently a experimentation based on utilization of 4 different either foundation models or even Quen. So it's nice to have similarities there against an OMOP implementation with MCP servers in between, with just focusing on Cynthia data. And so it's really interesting results that I got back in regard to how well some of these different tools how well these different models throw tools at OMOP and what kind of conversations or what kind of prompts they do well with, what kind of open or guided facilitation. In any case, I think it'd be really cool to, in a true OMOP fashion, combine forces and see what we can do as a community there. In that regard, question following that comment, where can we work on MCP tooling together and register MCP tools? Is this more of I should show up to the generative AI work group and talk about MCP sharing there, or is there another place?
Well, I'm taking the lead on this, so you can just reach out to me, and I'll be
Okay.
happy to coordinate in between the Gen AI meetings. I'm working with Georgina in Australia on some components that they've been working on knowledge representation and knowledge graphs and embeddings that will help with some of the concept side of things. And I've scanned and I've seen a ton of great work, probably some of your work as well with MCPs. So the way that I architected this is if you go into docs, you'll see that there is a YAML file for a service registry. And so basically here is there's the service that's being registered is you can think of it like a flow that can coordinate one or more tools. And the ACP, the agent client protocol, is sort of the coordinator, it's the orchestrator, and it separates the shell that it's going to run into or the environments that it's going to run into. So you're not tied to R, you're not tied to Python. The ACP just more or less is coordinating things. It's a service. It receives a request as JSON, and then it runs it through a flow, which you can register your MCP tools on. So when I'm going through the phenotype recommendation, there's two MCP tools. There's one that knows how to do the search that I talked about, which is utilizing those embeddings that I brought down in a disk and getting an embedding for the person's study intent. And then there's a tool that's pulling together the prompts because you like me, I agree. I think smaller models often do really, really well when you know how to prompt them, as long as they're good at bringing back structured JSON data. A lot of times they're pretty effective. So that's an opportunity, at least in theory, in terms of how it's architected, that we should come up with other ideas and strategies, and we can test different ways of doing things and have these registered in here. You can even imagine configuring a specific profile, which would utilize maybe different MCP tools given a different environment. There's some basic things that we try to place down here that that we'll have to like see how that fleshes out. Originally, I was going to say no row level data gets sent to the LLM, but when I was working on the keeper use case, I was like, gosh, you got to send row level data, kind of, but you maybe let's strip all the PHIs out. So you have to have this component that's deterministic, that's reviewing, ensuring there's no PHI before it gets sent up. Those kind of things we're fleshing out. But yeah, please check that out, and then check the top level of study agent as well, because I know there's a lot of text here, but if you drop down to where it says plan services, this is a draft, but this is illustrating the different kinds of things that agentic support could help with as people are doing, orchestrating like the deterministic OHDSI code to try and get a really good objective study design and maybe do it in a network way. So there's high level concepts here, there's high level operational ones, and then there's study component and testing and linting. These are not organized in any kind of flow like you saw me show in this diagram here. But anything that's camel or snake case in this diagram, it represents a particular tool, a flow, which could include one or more MCPs and an LLM in order to accomplish the task. Does that help answer your question?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, and then some. I greatly appreciate that. And I actually, just a really, really quick comment. I know Georgie pretty well, and I'm unfortunately given all the stuff the U.S. is doing via the problems with getting flights into Qatar. I'm actually going to be I'm going to be demonstrating Georgie's graph poster for OHDSI Europe, because unfortunately her graduate student is caught up in all that, and her flight's not going to be able to come through. So, in any case, yeah, a lot for us to talk about for sure.
Absolutely. I'm meeting with her today, which is like
nice.
7 in the morning their time. But
right.
and she's done a fork, and she just demonstrated last week a little bit of work with their knowledge stuff. So it's just the initial like minimal product. So yeah, we want. I know Martine has said let's try to get everybody to try and coordinate now, not herd the cats into one place, but build something where we can showcase all the good stuff that's happening, and like your stuff. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah,
I know. Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. No. Is it okay if you share the link to it, because I want to go to the Phenotype February because it's an important topic. Rich,
Yes.
is that okay?
Yes. But I can't use the chat. Can anybody add me to the team, and maybe I'll leave and come back, and then I can be on the chat.
Yeah. You can email me, and I can email
Or
everybody
you can
else.
email. Yeah.
All right. I'll email the chat right to you. Thank you. Keep us on task.
That's awesome.
And just want to regarding the herding the cat, like this year is a special year because the Martine's AI working group, which Richard is a major player in, and the Phenotype working group are working together, and that is our official OKR. That's why you're hearing a lot of these types of collaboration. So the cats are behaving.
Yeah. Okay, so we have Gautam, we have 18 minutes. There's two things I want to go through, which is all in the last bucket. Right. Okay, yeah. So we have you wanna discuss Phenotype February, correct?
Yes,
Well,
absolutely.
April. Yeah. So we discussed this at length in the last meeting, and this is just a update since we are approaching April, and we have kind of took the plan. Gautam, if you want to share your screen with the post that is now drafted, that would help. So now we have so for those who don't know, we're gonna have a late Phenotype February this year. That is April. It's
March.
It's February marching to April. So we're gonna do Phenotype February in April. It's gonna open up next Tuesday in the community call, March 31st. Patrick will open it up. And we're going to implement the same plan we agreed upon or discussed at the beginning of the year, where we're going to open a challenge for phenotyping. We're going to take one example only, and it's going to be myocardial infarction. The main reason it is acute myocardial infarction. We are doing this because it is a definition that we have across the community, at least two definitions that we used in big network studies that OHDSI did. That's the LEGEND study and the COVID ASIs. In both cases, we have used acute myocardial infarction phenotype, both of two different definitions that are both in the library. But we're going to open a challenge for people to use the new tools, anything they have, to phenotype acute myocardial infarction. However, the point is not acute myocardial infarction. The point is implementing new thoughts and new approaches for phenotyping. That includes AI and includes a lot of OHDSI thinking about the topic. So the way it's going to go is on March 31st, Patrick is going to open the floor. He's going to talk about the idea of phenotyping using all available data we have traditionally in observational data, and breaking down any clinical idea into all these different components that are related to the clinical phenomena.
Yeah. So you can have an entry event with just the code, or you can have an entry event with two sets of codes, or you can have an entry event with code or symptoms. You can represent the same clinical idea with multiple rules. And so we're going to talk about that.
And the concept applies both for rule-based, but also apply for deep phenotyping. The idea is you have a clinical phenomena that can be captured across different observational items in the data, and you're trying to work with those to come up with a definition. In the second week, we're going to use Atlas and rule-based as a way of demonstrating how we can think of phenotyping, rule-based phenotyping, using a templated approach, where you have an entry event criteria that has high sensitivity, and then you have many different inclusion criteria with different composition that includes a time temporality to that entry criteria or the counts, whatever, but how you can use these different components to now come up with a number of definitions that varies in these inclusion criteria, aiming to improve specificity. Of course, as a human, you can come up with a number, but if you think of this as a machine algorithm, then that can, of course, include endless number of permutations. Gowtham will demo how to do that in just using Atlas conceptually in April 7th. Then we're gonna take the definitions that we demonstrated how a human can build by those different seeds cohorts. And we're gonna use the idea of how we evaluate cohorts using the same idea that Richard touched on, which is by reviewing profiles of patients using Keeper. Martine just released the new version of Keeper that has a lot of details. It is Keeper LLM. And the idea here is that you can summarize a patient's profiles in relation using only data points that are related to the clinical phenomena you're trying to phenotype. So now you're reducing a very noisy profile with all the different data points that can happen into all the data points that are only possibly related to the clinical phenomena. And the way you have constructed that is from that, like taking the thread of MI. In the opening, Patrick going to talk about how MI can be represented and have multiple events related to it. And now you're going to use that same idea to abstract the profiles using Keeper into a set of data elements, which you can now view using like an R-Shiny. You can now, as a human, look at this and adjudicate the case because you know all the data points related to myocardial infarction. That's related to data points related to myocardial infarction, but also related to alternative diagnoses, which are the source of misclassification. I'm going to answer the question once I just go through the plan. And then that's going to give the community an idea of how we can think of evaluation in an era of LLM, where we can actually have the idea of Keeper LLM adjudication patients profiles. We're going to do an experiment on that call on April 14, where people going to adjudicate themselves. Maybe we can go through over 5 or 6 cases like live. And so people understand what Keeper LLM is. They'll understand what they as a human, how they can perform that task. April 21st is a break because it's the OHDSI European Symposium. And then on April 14, after we show how those seeds cohorts performed using Keeper, we're going to open the challenge up. So people on April 14th can submit their own definitions of MI now that they learned a little bit of how we're thinking about the topic, or forget all of that and they submit their own definition using whatever method, as long as the definition can be represented in a JSON or SQL, whatever that can be implemented on the common data model. We're going to run all the submitted definitions on Keeper, similar to what we did in the definitions we demoed from the existing MI definitions. People can also take those MI definitions that we reviewed, the seeds ones, or the one that existing from the library that we use in Legend and in COVID-ASI, and improve on them and submit a new one. And then we're going to run everything on Keeper LLM, the package that Martin just released. It does patients' profiles, adjudicate that, and produce an estimate of the measurement errors of sensitivity, specificity, PPV, and index event kind of misclassification. We're going to summarize all of that on April 24th in the final rundown. And hopefully by then, we help thinking of phenotype differently now that we have capacity of AI models that can help, that can think beyond, like can include combinations of definitions beyond what a human can do, and then adjudicate that through also an LLM process. I'm going to stop here and see Richard have a question.
Yeah, just a quick question. So last I checked with Martine's code, he had in Keeper another function call that would be able to do the LLM interaction. Is that the Keeper LLM you're talking about, or is there something different than that? Do you know?
Yeah, I talked to Martin.
Yesterday,
Okay.
he just had a release, so he updated that a little bit, Richard.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's just an opportunity, and I don't want to detract or set the scope too broad, but there's a potential opportunity to test. This will be an initial test for those people who want to try it, to test again our study agent as the component, because it will have an R-based function that would just call the study agent to do all that prompting that Martine has developed. It'll do that prompting and then come back, and it'll assemble a table that will add the feedback. So it's an opportunity if we want to try to coordinate that.
That was the reason I said that. That was the reason I said to your comment about it's not validated, that the community can help you validate.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
So why do you think we can? Yeah, so we can run both. Yeah, let's add that into the workflow.
The difference fundamentally is that people who would use it, they would have to be able to set up a service in their own environments, which not everybody can do that. But because otherwise, the way he has it set up, I think it's just configured within R to make a call to a commercial LLM, and and so we can coordinate and see. Maybe it's not going to work, but it's worth a discussion. Thank you.
Yeah. Joel,
you're on mute. You're on mute, Joel.
Sorry. So you're going to have the LLM do the performance evaluation for you?
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, if you can, I'd like to have the opportunity to do some performance evaluation.
Yeah. Yeah, so for that, Joel, I was actually gonna so we can also do the yeah, so we can also do the adjudication going to be mainly on Keeper, but Gowtham in the forum in the post we can also just like Richard just said, we can also run Keeper within the study agent from Richard package. We can do similar because Joel has also a working on adjudication using a rubric-based approach. So we can also add that just to understand the performance of these things. So we will focus the community call on April 14th on the results from Keeper, but that doesn't stop us from running other things. And on the rundown on April 20th, talk about the differences between these things. And we can also discuss this within the work group meetings separate.
Joel, how mature is your experimentation with that? Is it ready for?
Oh, it's definitely ready to run. I mean, it's not in a finished form yet, but it's definitely ready to run.
Great. Yeah.
On that note, Gowtham, because I also invited Jared, and I know it's the last item on our agenda, but I want to see if we can, because it's also related. On that note, since we've talked, so Richard talked through how he's using the study agent to find phenotypes from existing library, and by doing that, also reviewing the definitions. Joel is working on an evaluation that is a different approach from Keeper, but it's probably more efficient. And Jared has been working on LLM workflow to develop phenotypes from scratch. So we can also invite people in Phenotype Phebruary to submit their own phenotypes regardless of the workflow. And one of the workflows we're hoping to test during Phenotype February is what Jared is working on. So Jared, you have 5 minutes and to go over your idea of how it works, because he also has an abstract in the OHDSI UK symposium. But maybe we can just give people an idea of how you're thinking about the problem.
Awesome. Yeah, I can give a very high level overview. So I guess I took a look at Richard, your GitHub, and it looks like at least there's a lot of elements of what you are doing that I'm also exploring, and specifically the building of cohort definitions. So what I've done is I've essentially engineered 2 different system prompts. So a librarian system prompt that takes in clinical context and spits out via Elmer, this R package, a structured output that includes that essentially packages up your clinical context. It retrieves literature, it references clinical terms, and it packages up like a set of potential inclusion criteria, exclusion criteria, entry event, like these kind of necessary components for for constructing a phenotype. That packet is sent along with another system prompt to a refining agent that takes that content and generates as input and generates caper code as output. I think very similar to what your cohort definition build does. And it passes that R code back, and then there's an automated diagnostics workflow where that gets rendered to SQL, the cohort gets generated, preliminary diagnostics are run, and essentially the diagnostics on that cohort get fed back into that refining agent where it reiterates, re-updates the caper code, and does this over a series of iterations. I think I haven't gone into depth on the study agent repo, but I guess we're thinking along similar lines. And I think maybe this is just a zoomed in version on some of the work that you're doing, where really it's like, if I give you some clinical context, can you write me caper code that'll allow me to generate a definition and also give me kind of some preliminary diagnostics on that definition. So that's where it stands. I had a few things, but I realized in the interest of time, I'm not going to show anything today, and I see that there's some questions, so happy to discuss further and also chat offline about this. So go for it, Dan.
I'm not sure about question, but also a comment there. I similarly developed an MCD tool that instead of going to Caper, it sidesteps the need for R and just builds up a Circe JSON definition within a Python package that it can directly access via MCP. So it's incredible how much a lot of us are thinking in the same direction and coming up to similar conclusions.
I have to say that was my initial attempt, but I found that for some of the complex logic, the JSON would fail, or it would fail to render properly. And when I generate the caper code, I have like a pretty much 100% success rate on rendering. So if you've solved that problem, I'd be very curious to chat further of like how you prompted like this JSON spec. But that's awesome.
And I'll just say real quickly that it's what I was showing was you have phenotypes, you have existing phenotypes that have been indexed, and you're getting a recommendation back. But there's also a branch where none of those fit, and I think that's actually going to be the more common situation initially. That the user looks at the suggestions and say, "Gee, there's really nothing here." In fact, the bigger models like MedGemma will sometimes just say that, like, none of these things work for you. In which case, what are you going to do? You're going to have to go through and build your own cohort definition. And the LM can tell you, like, this is what you should do, but what you're building is exactly what's needed for that workflow, what both you all are building. One last thing about Caper. Caper is cool. I think Caper has some expressiveness issues when it comes to concept sets in particular areas. So there's going to be a balance that we'll figure out. So it's good that everybody's playing with both. Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks.
Great.
All right, very exciting.
All right, we are on time. So, Azza, any last comments before we close out?
I want to ask if Joel, I'm not sure if you have an update on Phenotype. Have you released it to the community, or is it still internal?
Not yet. We have,
Okay.
yeah, the only thing that's holding it back at this point is Martine and I are trying to figure out a solution to the very, very large testing of certain cancers because of the ICD-03 codes in there that are descendants of SNOMED codes, and there's some of them that could be tens of thousands of them in the as children of some of the things. So we're trying to figure out an efficient way to do that. Otherwise, it's all set and ready to go.
Yeah, so for people who don't know, the reason why the work group is focused on that component that were last year kind of effort is because you're all gonna use different approaches using AI to build cohorts, but one of the steps is the concept set selection, and we have found with our work that if you let the LLM play with that, it can really go bad. And we found that there's one workflow that really works well, and I would like it to be in the public for people to build on that instead of experiment with concept set selection for a given snow midterm. I think we have a solution that works for everybody that should be considered. Okay, we're at time.
We are on time. The links, if anybody wants me to share the links publicly, please send it to me via email or my OHDSI chat, and I will put a recap on the OHDSI forums. Thank you, everybody, for this wonderful meeting. I learned a lot, and I hope you did, and looking forward to
Phenotype February and April.
aPHril, right? aPHril.
Bye-bye.
Thanks so much. Bye.
Bye.